Okay, here we go. Let's make a talk about a cash flow sweep in the context of an acquisition. I put one of these old user forms. You go to the Visual Basic, and it's very user form. I think I've discussed that in the section on macros. So in this case, we have a purchase price of 100,000. We put 70% debt, LIBOR rate or something of 1%, Euribor 3% credit spread, a margin, a tenor of 9 years. Let's make that 5 years to be more typical. We're going to be able to put a cash flow sweep in or not. I'm not going to talk about these little gimmicks thing that you get from a developer and insert. And we can put payment in kind or not. And why is that? Not here. Okay, and then terminal multiplier. This is exit multiple here, and then we have some levels. This is a little bit different because we have some levels of debt to EBITDA, and then given those levels of debt to EBITDA, we have some cash sweep. We also have a covenant that says if the DSCR gets below 1.3, you're not allowed to pay a dividend, as we have some that means we have some potential debt reserve accounts, and we have to put an interest rate in. And then in terms of our operations, and really, this is disgusting in a way. I used to make these things and violate my own rules so badly is just not acceptable. So we really have some transaction assumptions, and then we have some operating assumptions. Okay, and then we have some financing. Okay, and the structure of the model starts with the assumptions, and then you can put those things in yet. Next, okay, and okay, and we have some this exit multiple, where that should go. It probably could have gone with the operating assumptions. That might be some sort of other assumptions. Okay. Okay, that's going to be a big variable. Okay, and yeah, how could we do this? Did I do this one? We need to, excuse me, but we do need to put a little bit. Okay, fine. I'm going to do this without CapEx and without depreciation. So this is cash flow. This is cash flow after CapEx. And we're going to have no taxes and so forth. And let's assume that that has some growth. Shift down, Control D, and let's just say we've got a base case of, let's make it high growth, 7% growth. We could put 7 here, and we get 7% growth. Now, all you have to do is, if you copied this down, you just have to change this F8 to an F9. So all you have to do, we haven't really discussed these things yet. Let's put, click them both and make them both smaller and put them up here. So let's put 7 here. Whoops. It's all ready to go. So once you have one in one place, you can copy it up. Okay? And what we assumed here is that, we come and then 2008 happens or whatever the next crash is going to be, and suddenly our cash flow, let's not put it all the way down 90%, but let's say it goes down by 44%. Okay, so we have to see how the cash flow sweep worked in the context of all of this. So let's get to our modeling. Now, to get to the structure of the model, I suppose let's put the operations in. And first, I noticed when I did this last time, I didn't do this. It should have been like this. So we put base, cash flow, and let's, okay. How about this? I want an extra column. And I'm going to move our sweep over here. Oh, God, it put all this horrible stuff. And these lines. Excuse me for this. Okay, so our base cash flow was 20,000, and our growth rate was the 7%. So why don't we start with our 20,000 and then multiply that by 1 plus the growth rate. Okay. And shift control 1, and we have the growth rate, and then post crash. Now I don't assume a recovery here. So, but if you look at some real LBOs, like some of these, I know the famous Tribune company LBO, this would be kind of a representation of what happened. We'll take this thing is less than, or I'm sorry, this thing is greater than or equal to this one. What happened there is that there was they had made the LBO like, I don't know, 1 year or 2 years before the crash. LBO, a media company, assuming, I don't know how high growth, they didn't assume dramatic growth rates, but the leverage was very high, and it just completely tanked. And then we put our post crash cash flows. And clearly, you can kind of see what really the banks don't want to do is, as a banker at least I wouldn't want to do this, is to say, okay, well, let's allow all these dividends, and just after a crash, then we've allowed the dividends, haven't repaid the debt, and then we're really stuck holding it back. So we take this thing and we multiply it by 1 minus, no, we'll just multiply it. So, no, I think 1 minus, this is the right way to do it. But we only multiply that when it's post-crash. Make sure and put it inside of that bracket, not outside. Okay, so suddenly, there's our crash, and we went from 24 to 14. Okay, that's our operations. Now let's put the next section of our model, which is simply the sources and uses, and let's put the purchase price first. The purchase price we'll put in year 0. That's how much we're spending for the company. And then we'll put that's, okay, fine. That's the uses, sources, the debt, and we said the debt is 70% of the transaction. So we take the total oh, it doesn't have fees and everything else in, and then we put the equity. Doesn't have asset sales. Maybe I should make another thing with asset sales. Okay, all of them can fit. Once you get the sources and uses, it's pretty straightforward. Now let's put the debt schedule. And let's put the opening balance. And then let's take away the scheduled debt. And let's take away the cash sweep. And let's get a closing balance. And then let's put our interest cost. Okay, and then why don't we do the same thing? It's not worth doing. Well, I'll copy opening balance at least. Wow, boring. This time, this is going to be for our defaulted debt. Shift spacebar, Shift Control plus to insert a line. And then let's add the defaulted debt to this. And take away the repayments of default. And get a closing balance. And get an interest cost. So we have a little bit of more interesting cash flow analysis going on. And before we start filling this in, it might be a good idea, that's what I suggest in the book, to put a cash flow waterfall. And we start with our cash flow, which is up there. I'll call it our operating cash flow. Okay, and then we can take away the scheduled debt service just like we have been. And then that gives us our cash flow for sweep. Now when we do the cash flow sweep, that's going to depend on what our debt to cash flow is. I see why I put a much higher terminal value multiple, because it's really cash flow after, and I didn't call it exit multiple of cash flow, not really EBITDA. Maybe that's okay. Let's give you 10. All right. And I think I should have also put up here, add the terminal proceeds. Okay, and then we have the scheduled debt service, and we get the cash flow for the sweep. And then here's what could happen after we get the cash flow for the sweep. If it's positive, we're going to sweep it. If it's negative, okay, why don't we put less cash sweep, and then we can put cash flow after sweep, which we just have a whole lot of subtotals, and then we can put less cash trapped, and then below the cash trapped we can put in the cash after trap, and we can see, well, we'll put less. The cash trap should be, I did it wrong, excuse me. Cash flow after sweep, why don't we put add the defaulted debt. And then after we add the defaulted debt, let's take away the repayment of default, and then get us cash flow before trap. Okay. we add cash flow, and cash flow after trap that's our dividends. Okay, there we have everything, and we need a couple of ratios, DSCR, and why don't we put the debt to cash flow, and then below the debt to cash flow, why don't we put a match, and we can put cash sweep percentage. And what this is, I purposely, I think, back down and put this so it goes down. So the higher, once we have a normal kind of company, we don't have any sweep anymore. When you have a high leverage company, we might sweep 100%, and then it may be a little bit less. We gradually allow some dividends as the company becomes a regular old company. We have a covenant that says you're not allowed to pay any dividends, and that's on a different basis than the rest of them. So I think we're kind of ready to go, and let's make the closing balance of our debt come from the sources and uses statement, and the opening balance equals the closing balance. The scheduled repayments, let's put in our assumption, which was the debt tenor was 5, so we take the bottom divided by the 5, and I'm just going to tell you, I suppose I should have been much more explicit about this, but whenever you have a cash flow sweep, you might repay this early. We generally should do this because we want it to stop paying after 5 years. So if we take this one minus this one minus this one, we don't know what the cash flow sweep will be. Shift Control R, then at least it stops the repayments here. Now what it's going to do is stop the repayments earlier if we have a cash flow sweep. But this cash sweep, we do not know until we go down to the cash flow statement. And I think we should put, alright, I'm gonna just do this the really old-fashioned way. Whenever we have one of these subtotals, I think let's indent a couple. That was one too many indents. Okay, whoops, oh shoot! Okay, we'll just indent it once, how's that? Alright. Good enough. What a waste of your time. Okay, and then the interest cost, well that's the interest rate plus the credit spread. Okay, so let's take the opening balance and multiply that opening balance by the number. Okay, and then we get the defaulted debt. Oops, I didn't copy this across. Okay, the defaulted debt opening balance equals the closing balance of the prior year. The defaulted debt amount is from the cash flow statement is 68, and then the repayment of the default is 69. And we can't do both, so it's okay to put those in. So we put the opening balance plus the defaulted debt minus the repayment of the defaulted debt. Let's take the same interest and multiply that interest by the opening balance. Okay, and Shift Control 1, Shift Control R. The operating cash flow is just from our crash analysis. Our terminal proceeds, I didn't do, that's embarrassing. Let me see. Okay. balance are 10 times, and I'm doing something horrible again, which means I'm taking our final year cash flow and multiplying it by 10. Sorry about that, but I haven't put all our switches in and everything else to make it really flexible. Then we can take away our, I think we need a subtotal here. Okay. We need our operating cash flow. Oops. Plus terminal. Maybe not. Maybe I'm overdoing the just a bit the subtotals, but what can I say? And then we can take our scheduled debt service, which is our scheduled repayment plus the debt. So in this scenario, we're just making it, which means we have cash flow that's available for a sweep. Now, if let's take our debt to cash flow. So we can take let's do this with the opening balance, because that's all we would know by the time, and otherwise we'll have a horrible circular reference. So let's take the debt divided by the operating cash flow. This gives us only 3. Right. So that means the sweep percentage, we can put match of this one against it says in the match of this one against all of these. Okay, and F4. And then put a comma -1 because it goes down. What this says is we took, if we look at this one, it took the 5th line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that right? No. Okay. Okay, let me redo that. Equal match. Go up to this line and then select all of these. I thought that's what I did. Press the, I apparently must not have. Press the F4. You'll see it and I won't, because I'm never going to look at this video again. Okay, and you put a -1. That means that the numbers are descending rather than ascending. And that gives you a number 2, which says that we're in the second category. First, it would be 100%. Second would be 60%. And we're not, if we were below 3, then we would be at 50%. But we're up to 60%. So that means that our cash sweep percent is the index, and we don't have to make any adjustments. You have to be careful when you do these things. You can sometimes do them too quickly, like I do. So we have a 60% cash flow sweep, which means that we take the cash flow available for the cash sweep and you first multiply it by the 60%. Now you would only ever sweep the cash flow if this thing is positive. So we put that around. And finally, we would never make a cash flow sweep unless we have enough debt. We don't have to sweep the cash flow if we have no debt left. So you take the opening debt balance minus the amount you've already repaid just in the line above for the debt service, and then you're okay. That's another min-max. And then you have the cash flow after the sweep. Okay. And if that's negative, then we have a default. So we put a maximum and put a minus that and 0. Now if we have a default and this is positive, we put a maximum of this number or 0, but we haven't had a default yet because we need to make the minimum of the opening balance. We're not going to pay more than we have of the opening balance. That means we have a cash flow after default, which is plus the defaulted debt minus the thing, and then the cash trap depends on the cash trap covenant, and our DSCR we could compute as the cash flow divided by the debt service. Let's make that put an if statement G67 greater than 0.1 or something. Okay, and then we can put a test. Okay, so the test depends on this covenant, and we did violate the covenant, so I should put test covenant violate. Okay, and that we just take this one, and if this one is less than or equal to that one, it's true. So what we do is we trap this cash. We take this one and multiply it by the true, and that means we're not allowed to pay any dividends. And if we've trapped the cash, we have to put the trapped cash somewhere. So we need to make one more little account up here, and let's put the cash trap, and let's add, it's almost like a negative debt, put an opening balance, add the trap cash, subtract the release of the trap cash, and then we put a closing balance. Now what we need is and then we can put an interest income, and then we're just about finished with our model. The we have this where it says less cash trapped. We can also add cash released, and that's going to be almost the same thing. We just put the, it's not almost the same thing. We take our opening balance and we multiply it by the opposite of the true. So if we have any cash that's in that account, we can just release it by using that switch. So the opening balance is equal to the closing balance. The trapped cash comes from our cash flow statement, just like everything else. The released cash even just comes from our cash flow statement, just like everything else. Our closing balance is the opening balance plus the amount we trap minus the amount we release. We put in a interest income assumption, and we multiply that by the opening balance, and then we're finished with this one, and I think we're finished with just about the whole thing. Okay, and so I just put some underlines here, and you can see that in the first year we had some cash flow sweeps, we had a cash trap here. In the next year we were able to release the cash flow trap. The debt to EBITDA went down so much that we only had 2 times, and our cash sweep went down to 20%. Then our cash sweep went to 0, but we had a default on the debt because even though the debt wasn't so much, there was still the debt service, and that's when our cash flow had a big crash. Okay, and then the next year, our debt service went down, I think. So we were able to repay the default, and what was left over went to dividends. And then the rest worked okay. So even with a crash, this worked okay. But why don't we make it a little bit more pessimistic? So let's make the crash occur in year 2. And let's make the cash flow reduction from the crash be 60%. How's that? In that case, we start with the same thing. We have a cash sweep, and we trap the cash. And the next year, I think these, let's put a percent here. So we had to keep sweeping the cash. Then in the next year, we had a default, finally a repayment of default, and I don't know why it allowed us to release the cash. That's okay. We could be a little bit careful about that one. And then in the next year after that, we're still able to pay off the debt, even with this kind of very negative scenario. It took us a lot longer, but we're able to do that. All right, so that's a cash sweep in the context of a kind of acquisition model and a leveraged acquisition model. Whoops, uh-oh. How do I turn this off now? Oh no.